by Sirwalterj Jones show. I'm here. It is a midday connection, baby. How y'all is? Come on in. The water is fine. The water is a crack-a-lacking. Today I want to talk about the state of our union to the address. It was a sight to see, you see, from yesterday. It is written in the Constitution of time that the President of the United States, whoever it is duly required to present a State of the Union address to the American public. Why? Well, State of the Union address is a time for the President to give you the forecast or the current situation, the weather report. And it is not a time for party bickering and fighting and talking about how better you are, my dog better than your dog. It is a time for you to talk about how great the nation is, what I've done to make it great, and what we're getting ready to do to make it greater. All presidents do this, and what Donald Trump did yesterday was kind of no different than what other presidents have done, although we are in a time and a climate now that we've never seen before with the type of man that we have today. So I want to talk about some things here dealing with our nation and the two parties that we tend to fight over. Those of you who might have seen the union address, I want to talk about that, and I made some notes here. I got a whole bunch of notes that I wrote down for you, for those of you who are new to politics and you want to know what's going on and how things work and how do we get to the place that we are right now. I decided to jot down some notes. Sat here for about an hour so I can kind of remember some things here from my understanding what history is, and not so much the history from what I learned in grammar school and high school, because a lot of that history was flawed. They taught you things that they needed you to know, they wanted you to know, and some things, whole bunch of things they left out. Good to see Sam Mack and Deanne and a bunch of you here. All right, so I want to bring up how we got to this place. This whole two-party situation is can be kind of sickening to me. Amber Rogers, Demetris, Hunt, and Clarence, Diane, blessings to all you, Belinda and Keisha, and Robert, a whole bunch of y'all here. Okay, listen, and those of you on YouTube, it's good to see you. Why don't you go ahead, if you can, hit the like button. You may not like it right now, so you can reverse it later on, but hit the like button and go ahead and subscribe over somewhere over there. I don't know where it is. Okay, watching the of course the union address. It is a fiasco that we see every January. Good to see you, Deanne and Tommy. It is something that we see every January. Again, once a year is required. This is Donald Trump's third, right? State of the Union address. Some strange things did happen in the address, of course, and not so much what he said in the address, but more so the cartoon characteristics that happened with Donald Trump and with the Speaker of the House. All right, people were focused more so on those two people than they were the content of what he was saying. First of all, it is ritual that he present his written remarks to both the Vice President and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and Pence, who's the Vice President. And when he gave his speech to Pelosi, she reached to shake his hand, and he did not shake her hand. Now, there is a fight on both ends. Number one, he purposely did not want to shake her hand. Number two, Victoria, good to see you, he did not see her hand to shake her hand. But when he got to Pence, notice what he did with Pence, you understand? So, you know, the fighting will continue. And then, of course, he went through his prepared speech through the teleprompter. He stayed on point, believe it or not, which is something that he can't do. And I noticed in all of his State of the Union addresses, he do stay on point. I guess his advisors convinces him that you can't mess this up. All right, and so he stayed on point, even though there were a lot of lies in what he said. There were a lot of lies for those of you who stayed focused on what's going on in America over the past 3 years. There were some things that he did say that were blatant, in your face. I'm lying right now, and I need you to hear this and applaud me. All right, or just sit there and take it like a good little boy, a good little girl. So he went on ahead and did his prepared stuff. And then at the end of the speech, Nancy Pelosi stood up and she took the speech and she tore the pages as a representation, or symbolic, to say that this speech, I will not receive any of it. And then, of course, the White House had something to say about how what you're doing is you're not just tearing up what the speech. You're ripping into the fabric of you know, all of the guests that the presidents bring up, and they usually sit in the upper annals of the halls. All right, you're ripping up the democracy, or the plight, or all of the sad stories that you might have seen in there, all the inspirational stories. They're saying the White House says Pelosi ripped up those stories. All right, and so it was a good defense, believe it or not. Well, what is my reply on the non-shaking of the hands and the ripping of the speech? I thought it was child's play on both sides. It's child's play. Two grown people, and children are watching this, and they seen grown people act like children. I was against all of it. He was calm and rational, and you could see the other part, but he played to his audience well. Yes, he did. He told 401 years of lies in just the middle portion. I was able to hear it right. Yeah, in the middle portion. And so they both were acting like children. And I'm very verbal and vocal on when people, especially those who are up in age, when you act unseemly, what you've done is you lost. When you allow someone of your opposing side to cause you to act a certain way, you lost. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? You lost. Belinda, it was petty behavior. Yes. They got the best of you. When your enemy, your opposing side, does or says something that caused you to act unseemly, they got you. Speaking of cartoons, it was like watching a slow-moving clip from the 1990s satire, The Far. Yes, I remember The Far Side. Wow, for a moment in time, we all existed in an alternate universe. Yes. Beneath the dignity of age and office, but God once cursed a nation to be ruled over by women and children. Yeah. There you go. There you go. All right. So that's what I saw. I saw a bunch of petty, cartoonish, far-sighted messology, and both could have done better than that. But unfortunately, when you are for a particular party, whether you was for Pelosi or whether you was for Trump, you supported their fiascos, their ridiculousness. Okay, and it just makes America look silly. So I want to take you to history and take you to how did we get to this point where the United States Congress is the most divided body that we have ever seen in American history. It is the most divided body we have ever seen in American history. We've always been divided. The United States have always been divided, or there wouldn't be two major parties. There are other parties, or there just wouldn't be two parties. We have always been divided since the inception of this nation. Running from Great Britain coming over here, from the day that whoever came over here first, all right, the Indians were already here, and we made them a part of the United States. You see, the Indian nation is their own. They are their own nation. And when the United States go against the Native Americans, when they were fighting the Native Americans in the Trail of Tears, and taking their land and killing them and putting them in little places, segregated places and what have you. Okay, and now they are part of the United States of America. No, we are part of the Indian nation. That's really what it is. Because we are renting the land that we stole from them. All right, and so they are a separate nation. You got to understand, and I think a lot of people forget and don't even realize. They look at Native Americans as being a part of the United States of America. No, the United States of America, so-called by the framers of the Constitution, is on someone else's land, another nation. So they took over another nation, planted themselves here, and formed the United States of America, and began to veer off to the west through the Louisiana Purchase and through the white woman who they called Destiny, okay, and imminent, whatever it's called, all right, and they pretty much took over another nation. That's what they did. It's the same. What America did to the Native Americans is the same thing. What Russia is doing when they was annexing whatever the territory is, I can't remember. All right, and North Korea and these other dictators, when they go to war, what the Roman Empire did throughout the whole hemisphere, Asia Minor, what have you. Okay, we did the same thing with the Native Americans. So this is this whole thing about the speech and those who were supporting the Republican Party, and why we got to this point where we were able to vote in a man like this. It has everything to do with authoritarianism. Authoritarianism, and it's something that you can Google. I'm not going to go into all of it, but this is something very, very important that you need to see. You have to check yourself. Yes, Belinda. Okay, so this is really about the strong man. Everybody say, the strong man. Remember what the scripture said about the strong man, about overtaking someone's house. Thank you, Amber. Manifest Destiny. About taking over someone's house. In order to do that, you must bind the strong man first. Felicia Nash, good to see you. You're not eminent domain. I know what you're talking about there. That's taking over someone's housing and property, what have you, because you want to do something in the city. But it's really Manifest Destiny. They both are cousins. Felicia Nash, they're cousins. Good to see you, Antoine Ison. All right, so the strong man, that's what's happening here. And America, well, not just America, but mankind is attracted to the strong man. And we're seeing it here, and this is how Donald Trump got in office. So this was called the State of the Union, but this is really the state of non-union. This is the state of a divided nation, okay, address. That's what this is. So in 1854, we had two parties. We had the Whig Party, and we had, of course, the Democratic Party. And sometimes you'll see the Democratic Republican Party, okay, and you see these parties. And when you look at the presidents of the United States from George Washington on down, you'll see the different parties that they were a part of, okay. But you'll see the Whig Party, and the Whig Party was the party of the North, and the Democratic Party was the party of the South, all right. And the reason why we don't see the Whig Party anymore is because they were actually fighting against slavery. They were abolitionists, the Whig Party, okay? And they were fighting against slavery, and they could not agree remember I was telling you about the expansion to the west through the Louisiana Purchase, all right? As we were expanding to the west, there was a fear of slavery being allowed in the other new states that were being formed and found. All right, and so there was a fight over this one territory, Kansas. Here's Kansas again. You remember when Donald Trump says, congratulations, you Super Bowl winners, to the great state of Kansas? Okay, yeah, so should Kansas and Nebraska allow slavery? That was the fight. And so the Whigs could not agree with that, and so they disbanded and split up. Y'all still with me? Okay? Now, they split up, and the former members of the Whig Party formed what we know today as the Republican Party. You understand? And who was the head man? Who was the hype man for that party? They voted in a man by the name of Abraham Lincoln. You get it? Are you still with me? All right. Abraham Lincoln was really against slavery, but he was more so for the Union. Understand? He didn't write the Emancipation Proclamation because he loved it, black folks. No, he loved the Union more than he so-called loved black folks. He was against slavery, but he was more so against the Union. Y'all see where I'm going here? Y'all still with me? All right? And so what happened? Because of this, 11 southern states decided to secede from the Union. Blessings to you, Justin Deloney. I'm giving you a history lesson here. All right? So they began to secede from the Union, Felicia Nash, and they formed what we know in history as the Confederate States of America. You understand? Because this was a direct attack towards cotton was king back then. Understand? Cotton was king, and the Southerners were making a lot of money. There's a lot of your white friends who are wealthy now because of the South. A lot of your white friends who are wealthy now because of your uncle, your great-great-great-great-grandfather, your great-great-great-uncle and aunties, what have you, because of their back-breaking labor in the South. Your white friends are wealthy today because of your relatives. So 11 states succeeded from the North and created this Confederate state. And then the Civil War broke out. Yes, sir. Yes. Come on, sir. Okay. And then what happened? The Civil War ended. The North won. The Union won. The Emancipation Proclamation freed some states, some slaves, not all of them right away. And then in the writing of the 1866 Civil Rights Bill. With the writing of the 1866 Civil Rights Bills came the 13th and 14th Amendment. All right. And then what happened was there was reform to allow the freed slaves to have freedom and rights and privileges and opportunities like whites. Believe it or not, there was a time where they were voting in black men to sit in Congress. All right? It was a great time after the Civil Rights Bill was drawn up for African Americans. It was a great time, and that got bumped. From where? From the South. The Democrats. Yeah, the party that you are part of right now. I'm trying to tell y'all, I was trying to write this stuff out. Okay, so what happened? Government spending is what happened. Government spending during the war made the Northerners extremely wealthy. You see, the South was already wealthy through rice and cotton. Yes, the Reconstruction period. Yeah, here we go, Sharon Green. Through rice. See, it wasn't cotton at first. No, it wasn't about cotton. It was about tobacco, I believe it was. All right, it was about tobacco first, and then it was about cotton. And Eli Whitney and that whole cotton gin really made it possible that a slave could pick more cotton in one day than prior to that he could only pick a barrel, a bushel or whatever. But the cotton gin, he had several bushels, okay, in a day. So the South was already wealthy, but the government spending due to the war, the Civil War, caused the North to be wealthy. Big business, and the Republican Party was running the North, all right? And then here comes the word we see, capitalism, pop up a lot. So what did it do? It caused the abolitionists, the Republican Party, the ones who was against slavery, it caused them to lose their focus on helping African Americans, but they began to fall in love with the mighty dollar, the Benjamin. And they began to build their wealth and their riches. And this is why America is a nation of warlocks, is what we are. we are of course we have a demagoguery situation going on, but we are warlike, all right? We are warlords. We love war. America is belligerent, all right? That's the way we are. Now, when I say we, I don't mean you and I. It's mostly those who live on the Caucasoid mountains. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? All right? The colonizers, they love war. Why? Because it's big business. There's a lot of money in war, and they discovered that from the very first war they were fighting, and then they were fighting this war, the Civil War, and they became wealthy through it. They became wealthy. Okay? And so, because of that, they not wanting to fight for the civil rights anymore, they just took their hands off of it, and what did it do? It caused, initially it caused the South to construct these particular laws against these civil rights reforms, all right? Why y'all think we have the police department today? Why y'all think we have the jail situation, the penitentiary situation today? It's because of this. And then the Jim Crow laws, all right, that popped up in the South and then spread it to the North, all right? A lot of this happened because of that, okay? Now, if you look at some of the presidents, I discovered the life of the president named Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was the president during the onset of the stock market crash of '29. Herbert Hoover. I went to his Wikipedia page, and let me read this so that you can see how Donald Trump and what we have today is very much related to the time of Herbert Hoover. It's very much related to Richard Nixon as well. It's very much related to Ronald Reagan as well. Okay, it goes back and forth. Okay, so here's what the Wikipedia says about Herbert Walker. I think is his name Walker? Herbert Hoover. Hoover seldom mentioned. Now, Hoover was a Republican president. Okay, so you want to know why your grandparents and your parents vote Democrat always, no matter what the Republican Party is saying or doing, no matter what they say that you may agree with, no matter what their plans are, no matter what their the systems that they put in place that might benefit you, no matter, it doesn't matter. You will blindly vote Democrat because it has been set in you since birth. Before you were born, you were formed in the Democratic Party. Yeah, you were. Even though all African Americans were Republicans. All of them. Since 1866, they were Republicans. That's just the way it was. You were born into the Republican Party. But then right here, during Herbert Hoover, he seldom mentioned civil rights while he was president. He believed that African Americans and other races could improve themselves with education and individual initiatives. Now, here's where I agree with him. Okay? You can improve yourself. You should improve yourself. You should never depend on a congressman, representative, a mayor, or a governor, or a president of the United States, or anybody in politics to help you come up. Yes. You should never ever depend on anybody in public policy to help you come up. You're supposed to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. So he says, no. I mean, I love African Americans. You'll see in a minute how he used them. He says, but let them help themselves. Hoover appointed, watch this, a Republican president, Hoover, appointed more African Americans to federal positions than Hardie and Coolidge had combined. Hoover, that guy. But many African American leaders condemned various aspects of the Hoover administration. Notice the talk about how whenever Donald Trump speaks, he always speaks about African Americans in what area? Y'all put that in the comment. Whenever Donald Trump speaks about African Americans, what is his talking point? Put it in the comments. What is his talking point? So these African Americans were against his initiatives, okay? Including Hoover's unwillingness to push for a federal anti-lynching law. They wanted us to stop being lynched. And Hoover, he was against that law. I wonder why. Then Hoover also continued to pursue the what's called the Lily White strategy. The Lily White strategy. Thank you, Tommy. Trump brings up jobs. That's right. The Lily White strategy. Y'all ever heard of the Southern strategy? Anybody heard of the Southern strategy? It was used perfectly with Richard Nixon. The Southern strategy. Well, here he had what's called the Lily White strategy, removing African Americans from positions of leadership in the Republican Party in an attempt to end the Democratic Party dominance in the South. Did y'all see what I'm saying here? You see what's happening here with the Hoover thing? It was a Lily White strategy, which is what's happening right now. And when you look at the Donald Trump administration, look at all of the pictures that he take with his cronies in his administration. How many black people do you see? How many black people do you see in his administration? Whenever you see a picture of all of this people in his administration, how many black folks do you see? So, though Robert Moulton and some other black leaders accepted the Lily White strategy as a temporary measure, most African American leaders, they were outraged. Hoover further alienated black leaders by nominating conservative Southern Judge John J. Parker to the Supreme Court. Notice what Donald Trump said in his speech about judges and how many judges he selected. And he says there's more to come. Notice that. Judges. Y'all remember that show I did about how God is spending more time taking us back to the era of judges? Do y'all remember that show I did? You go on YouTube and type in the Sirwalterj show, and we'll go to my channel and I talk about the judges. The judges rule. We're trying to pay more attention to the presidential elections or what have you, which is very important, okay? Because that man, it's not so much about his policies, but who he select or he decide that he what's the word? Or nominate, whatever the word is, judges. Why do you think they did not allow Barack Obama to get that judge in? What was his name? And the Republicans liked that judge. He was upscale by both parties. They loved him, but Mitch McConnell blocked it. Said, no, you're a lame duck president. We can't allow you to select a judge because we'll wait for the new president to do that. The new president comes in, they impeach him, but still allow him to send bombs over to Iran and to give State of the Union addresses, pass bills and what have you, and he's impeached. You see what's happening here, y'all? It's a lot going on here, y'all. You got to pay attention. Hoover, like Trump, was an elite businessman who had no business in politics as president of the United States. He was a racist and an imbecile. He paid education and elitism showed off in his choices for our nation. There it is. There it is, right here. Where was I? Right here. Hoover further alienated black leaders by nominating conservative judges, okay, to the Supreme Court. Parker's nomination ultimately failed in the Senate due to opposition from the who? The NAACP and organized labor. NAACP had it blocked. How strong are we today, black folks? Many black voters, here it is. So you thought that blacks switched from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party in the 1960s. No, that's not when it started. It started here with Hoover. Many black voters switched to the Democratic Party in 1932 election, and African Americans would later become an important part of who? Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal coalition. Yes, Amber, Merrick Garland. Mitch says, let's block this Merrick Garland. And they loved him, but they didn't want Barack Obama electing him. Understand? Yes. So, black folks left the Republican Party in 1932, joined, not all of them, but many of them, they joined forces with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal. And as a part of his effort to limit unemployment, then Hoover sought to cut what? Immigration to the United States. Here's the whole thing right here. How did we get Donald Trump? We got him because of immigration. Herbert Hoover decided to cut immigration to the United States. In 1930, he promulgated an executive order requiring individuals to have an employment before migrating to the United States. You had to be employed before you could migrate to the United States. With the goal of opening up more jobs for U.S. citizens, Secretary of Labor William N. Doak began a campaign to prosecute illegal immigration or illegal immigrants in the United States. Sounds familiar, don't it? Sounds very familiar. I know it does. And then what happened? 1929, of course, the crash happened, and of course, Franklin Delano in the New Deal, they began to expand the government with social programs. Black folks had already jumped in, and the Republicans and the white folks got nervous about that. And y'all heard this whole redlining thing and y'all heard of the GI Bill, and you know, and giving loans for businesses and homes and property, what have you. Y'all see what's happening? It all happened right around this time. So 1964, we now have a Democratic president, Lyndon Baines Johnson. All right, he signs another civil rights bill, and white folks remembered that. And who was that? Who was the head man of the Republican Party at that time? Barry Goldwater. And Barry Goldwater is Donald Trump's cousin up here, because Barry Goldwater was considered a man who was psychotic. Something was wrong with him mentally. The more things change, the more they say the same. Come on, Sharon. Barry Goldwater. Okay? So Barry Goldwater opposed the Civil Rights Bill. He said that he opposed it only because the Republican Party is against big business, not big business, but big government. The expansion of government gives too much power to the government. And that is the strategy, or that is the whole mantra of the Republican Party. They are against big government. So when they see these federal programs coming forth, why do you think the Republican Party is always trying to cut federal programs? Always trying to cut it, because they don't like big government. And who benefits from big government? Minorities, immigrants, Hispanics, African Americans, okay? And so why do you think that the Republican Party is so against immigration and putting up walls? The number one word that I can think of is F-E-A-R. F-E-A-R. Y'all know what that spells? It's funny that every other race of people can get a what? Get a from the government? A what from the government? When black people do it, we have a problem. Get a Marcy, retype that. So what happened? 1964, African Americans jumped ship fully, and everybody became a Democrat. Yes, fear, Pitts, fear. Everybody became a Democrat. Okay? Whites shifted over to the Republican Party. Why? Abortion rights, prayer in school, the same fights that you've been hearing, that you hear with the Republicans today, it's the same fight. So this is why the South is so full of white Republicans. It's because of this. The immigration fight. Fear. Now, what is the pros and cons of being a part of both parties? Well, let me tell you. Pros and cons, okay? Number one, most African Americans don't know the history of the Democratic Party, because it was the Democratic Party that gave us the Jim Crow laws. It's the Democratic Party that restricted you from your rights, who lynched you, and it's the Democratic Party who gave you the Ku Klux to the Klan. Yeah, the Ku, is it Ku or Klu? The Ku Klux Klan. The Democratic Party did that. It was a wonderful gift, right? Okay? That's what's happening there. What you're saying, they are against big government, but they are not against big tax cuts for corporations. They thrive on pseudo trickle-down economy. Yep, economics. That's it. There's too much to that. Now, here's the thing. Here's how we got Donald Trump. Is it Klu? Is it Ku Klux Klan or Klu? Yeah, Klu. Okay? Here's why we have Donald Trump. Here's why. Republicans are loyal to their elected leader. You understand what I'm saying? They are extremely tribal. Republicans. Extremely tribal. Democrats are as well. Oh, but the Republicans got them beat. They are scared that minorities will eventually get their acts together and take over. Yep, Obama scared them to death. They were frightened, yes. So they had to ensure that never happen again, or at least not in the near future. Yep, absolutely. Republicans are scared stiff. And so what they do, they dedicate their lives to an authoritarian figure. Why? And it doesn't matter what he does, no matter what he says. Why do you think Donald Trump says, I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose anybody, not lose a voter? Because he knows how they operate. Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's never been conservative. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer. He's not a believer. No. He probably believes in some higher calling, but he doesn't follow any of it. He doesn't follow Christianity. None of it. He's perfect. He's the perfect authoritarian. He's perfect. And they will sacrifice their lives for him. Why? Because the enemy of mine enemy is my friend and my leader as well. Yep. When people operate in fear, they are subject to do anything. It's about keeping control. That's it. So Donald Trump could lie. It doesn't matter. His polls rise with them. He can do some really nasty things, sleep with porn stars and all kinds of stuff. That he could notice their talking points. First, it was no pro quo. Okay. First, there was no pro quo. Then, as they went into the Senate hearings, then the Republicans start saying, yeah, okay, he might have done it, but it shouldn't be impeachable. And then his lawyers begin to say some of the most strangest things that made no sense to the whole world, but it made sense to them. When one of his lawyers said, it's okay to bring in another nation during an election when you want to find dirt on an opposing party, okay, when you know that you probably will win, or you know that it is for the good of the party and all these things. It's okay to break the law if it's going to help you win an election. I mean, that was their defense. And their party said, you know what? You got a point. What is this? It is a strong delusion, I believe. And I'll tell you who's sending this strong delusion. He's not a Republican. He hijacked the party because he is an opportunist. As with any predator, he studied their weakness and pounced upon it. That's exactly it, Amber. Yes. A great predator study his or her victim. And what he'll do is he'll give them candy. He'll take them to these places, Bar Louis, or what's those places where all of the video games are, okay? He'll take them to the circus. He'll take them to Disney World. He won't touch them. No. He'll show up at their games. All right? He'll do all these wonderful things over time to make that person feel comfortable being around them. Yeah, Sharon says, sound like the devil. Yeah. Fearful people don't recognize morality, yes, righteousness, or anything that makes them appear weak. That's it, Pitts. That's it. Remember I talked about different strokes. What's his name? Willis. His character name is Willis. But what is his legal name? Remember I was talking about how he was molested by the manager, his business manager, or his agent. He was molested by his agent. And the parents didn't know he was being molested. He didn't even realize he was being molested. He thought it was normal that a man touch him sexually. That's what he said on Dr. Oz show. Okay? He thought it was normal to be touched by a man sexually like that. Like a pimp. Yep, recruiting prostitution. Yes. Thank you, Amber. Todd Bridges. All right? He thought it was normal. How did he think it was normal? How do I know? Because he said, then the co-host on the show began to touch him sexually. What was her name? Didn't she die? What was she, strung out on drugs or something like that? What was her name? She began to touch him sexually, and it felt normal. And he says, something's not right. Why is it when she's touching me the way she's touching me, it's normal, but when this man does it, it doesn't feel right? Thank you, Pitts. He was being conditioned. So this manager was telling Todd Bridges, here's what he says, you can't tell your parents. You can't tell your parents, because here's what your father is going to say if you tell your parents this. So he began to prepare. Thank you, Amber. Dana Plato. So the manager began to prepare him for just in case his parents find out, here's what your father is going to say. Thank you, Vancha. So what happened? Once he realized that this man was molesting him, he got upset. So he said he was at home with his mom and father, and the manager came over to the house. The mama answered the door. When the mama answered the door, the manager came in, and Todd's face was startled. So Todd was telling us on Dr. Oz, and Todd says, my mom saw my facial expression and she knew what was happening. He says, and Todd ran. And then the mama said, what are you doing with my son? Like that. Mom knew. That says something right there, y'all. And then the man said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You touching my son. I saw it on his face. And then the father responded the way the manager told Todd that he was going to respond. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. I trust that man. And on and on and on. And then that was Todd's, his I don't know, his revealing moment. He says, Todd says, that's exactly what the manager said that you would say. That's what Todd said to his father. He says, what you just said is exactly what the manager said you would say. So what did the manager, what was he doing? A good predator prepares not only the victim, but he also prepares the people around the victim. So he prepared the mother, and he prepared the father. He didn't prepare the mother, he prepared the father. The mother, no. The mother knew. All that intuition is something else. I'm sorry, but that's the exact same thing they do in some churches. Psychological manipulation is a killer. Pitts, that's it. Don't be sorry for telling the truth. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So with this Donald Trump situation, he is a perfect predator for those who we consider smart and intelligent. These are CEOs, very wealthy people, businessmen and women, all right? These are school teachers and these are preachers. The white evangelicals are eating this up, which says something about who they are. It's called grooming, Amber says, grooming. So while I'm watching this, it dawned on me, and I put the post up, it dawned on me who this man was, who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is Gus Fring on Breaking Bad. All right? Those of you who never seen Breaking Bad may not know who he is.